Knox never thought he'd spend his days lugging fusion cores for a race that thought hygiene was a quaint human myth. But here he was, skin slick with sweat and dignity long gone, a Z-Real overlord barking orders in a voice like a blender full of rocks. Faster, human. Think of it as exercise. Good for your weak little heart. Knox gritted his teeth. No sense in complaining. The last guy who mouthed off had been reassigned to waste disposal. No one came back from that with their sanity or a decent complexion. "Hey, Knox!" A voice as smooth as recycled air cut through his thoughts. Riva, ever the optimist, despite the shambles of their existence. She sauntered over, a small datapad clutched under her arm like it was the last coffee in the universe. "You won't believe what I found in the archives. If it's more mandatory motivational recordings, I'll pass," he said, pausing to wipe his brow with a stained sleeve. "Nothing like being told to love your captors while they watch you toil." Riva grinned, an expression that hadn't quite been beaten out of her yet. "Not exactly. It's a dance routine. From Earth. I knew you were always one shimmy away from flipping your lid," Knox replied, chuckling despite himself. "What are you planning, a flash mob rebellion? Revolution through choreography," she said, eyes twinkling with that dangerous spark of hope. "But seriously, it's different. There's something encoded in the movements." Knox arched an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A secret handshake to escape the jaws of oblivion," she shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just a distraction from counting days until retirement doesn't mean being turned into nutrient paste." Tired as he was, Knox's curiosity piqued. Anything to break the monotony of slave labor was worth a shot. "Okay, show me your fancy footwork," he said, slinging the fusion core onto the hover cart. They ducked into a maintenance shaft, away from prying Z-Real eyes. It was cramped and smelled vaguely of despair, but it was theirs. Riva activated the datapad, and they watched as a holographic figure sprang to life, moving with a grace that seemed almost magical in their gritty reality. "I'm supposed to believe that flailing around like a malfunctioning drone is the key to our liberation?" Knox asked, both skeptical and amused. "It's not just any flailing," Riva insisted, trying a clumsy imitation of the hologram's spins and kicks. "These steps are coded. They could mean something huge." Or, Knox countered, "they're just really bad human yoga techniques." Riva snorted. So cynical. "But think about it. The Z-Real are too dumb to notice. They think we're just monkeys dancing." Knox leaned back against the metallic wall, the cool surface a brief respite. All right, show me again. Let's see if we can dance our way off this rock." Together they practiced, their movements awkward, the space cramped. But with each turn and twist, the routine felt less like mindless gyrations and more like a puzzle coming together. The humor in their struggle wasn't lost on them. Two humans, shackled and sweating, trying to find freedom in ancient choreography. "You know," Riva said mid-spin, "if we survive this, I'm never dancing again." "If we survive, I'm never working out again," Knox shot back, narrowly avoiding a collision with an exposed pipe. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, cutting their laughter short. Z-Real patrol, their timing impeccable as ever. "Back to work, slaves," their leader sneered, antennae twitching with disdain. "Or do I need to remind you that dancing is not part of your duties?" "No, sir," Knox replied, adopting the tone of a beaten dog, eyes downcast. "Just stretching, for better productivity." The Z-Real snorted, a sound like a clogged drain. "Stretch all you want. Just make sure you don't forget where you belong." As they shuffled back to their assigned workstations, Riva whispered, "We'll find a way, Knox. We're closer than ever." He nodded, stealing a last glance at the datapad. "Yeah, and when we do, we'll give them a show they won't forget." The rest of the shift dragged on, a symphony of monotony and whispered hopes, but something had changed. A glimmer of possibility, as fragile as a soap bubble, but enough to keep them moving. Knox and Riva couldn't shake the feeling that their fate was tangled up in those ridiculous dance moves, a cosmic joke with a punchline they were desperate to hear. Later, after the lights dimmed and the Z-Real retreated to their quarters, Knox lay on his bunk, contemplating the absurdity of it all. Imagine, he mused to the cracked ceiling, humans taking back the galaxy one pirouette at a time. Riva from the bunk above chuckled softly. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Until then, we dance. And with that in the cold confines of their cell, hope lingered. They kept at it day after grinding day, the dance steps becoming as automatic as breathing. Knox found himself dreaming about them, each movement tied to some half-remembered fragment of Earth culture. The freedom, the rebellion, the sheer audacity of existing. It was madness, but what else did they have? One day, as they were rehearsing under the guise of routine maintenance, something clicked. Riva's eyes widened with realization. These movements, she gasped, they align with the station's grid. It's like a map. Knox's heart skipped a beat. A map you're telling me this dance leads us to. What? A ship, an escape pod, maybe. It highlights paths we haven't seen before. Access routes, hidden panels, it's genius. He looked at her, half in disbelief, half in awe. You mean we could actually dance our way out of here? Riva nodded, her excitement tempered by the inevitable risk. If we can pull it off without getting caught. Right, Knox said, voice suddenly hoarse. Because slipping past an entire alien race with a jig is just another day at the office. But beneath the sarcasm, a plan was forming. The Zeril, with their single-minded arrogance, had never bothered to truly understand their human underlings. They didn't see the determination beneath the tired faces, the silent defiance in their steps. Knox and Riva decided to put their plan in motion during the next shift change, when the chaos of transition offered the best cover. They danced through the corridors like possessed marionettes, praying the movements would guide them true. The designated day arrived, and as the klaxon signaled the end of one shift and the start of another, Knox and Riva slipped into the familiar rhythm. Feet shuffled, arms waved, bodies spun in an intricate ballet of desperation and hope. As they moved, Knox felt something shift deep within him, a sense of belonging not to this place but to a shared past, a forgotten future. It was as if the ghosts of Earth danced alongside them, urging them forward. The Zeril, unaware of the humans' true intent, merely scoffed and barked their usual commands, too wrapped up in their own superiority to see the truth unfolding before their eyes. Their path led them through maintenance tunnels, utility shafts, places the Zeril rarely ventured. They danced through checkpoints, each step a silent rebellion, each turn a whispered promise of freedom. Just as they were beginning to believe they might actually succeed, the alarm blared, a harsh, grating noise that shattered the illusion of safety. Knox and Riva froze, their carefully orchestrated plan teetering on the brink of disaster. "We've been spotted," Riva hissed, her voice tight with panic. "No kidding," Knox replied, pulse pounding in his ears. "What now, O wise choreographer?" Before Riva could respond, the corridor ahead burst open, revealing a squad of Zeril guards, their expressions a mixture of confusion and contempt. "Humans," the lead guard sneered, raising a weapon. "Did you really think you could dance your way to freedom?" Knox glanced at Riva, their shared fate hanging in the balance. "Well," he said with a gallows grin, "I guess it's time for the encore." And with that, they launched into the routine again, not out of defiance, but out of sheer, desperate hope that somewhere embedded in those ancient steps lay the key to salvation. The Zeril, bless their clueless hearts, had never thought twice about the humans shuffling around amidst the flickering lights and humming machinery of the oppressive station. Why would they? To them, the humans were just slightly evolved chimps, better suited to grunt work than any semblance of cunning or strategy. But right now, Knox and Riva were banking on that underestimation to slip through the cracks they'd spent weeks prying open with broken fingernails and stubborn hope. In the dark recesses of the archives, where the air smelled like burnt toast and desperation, Knox adjusted the strap of the too heavy fusion core on his back. "You know," he started, pushing through the grime on the floor with his foot, "I always thought if I was going to die in a rebellion, it'd be a bit more romantic. Banners waving, speechifying, maybe a bit of for the greater good nonsense." Riva snorted, flipping through the pages on her battered datapad. Yeah, well, here we are. If it makes you feel better, I could wave a dirty sock around and chant. But I'm not sure that'll do much against laser cannons. Let's save the sock waving for Plan B, said Nox. Where are we on Plan A? Riva squinted at the tiny, blinking screen. This is our last shot. We have to figure out the rest of the sequence. If we get it wrong, we'll be turned into very messy red stains on the floor. Comforting, Nox grumbled, eyes scanning the corridor. The Z-Rill had stepped up their patrols recently, probably due to a faint whiff of rebellion in the air. Paranoia was a hell of a motivator after all. The quicker we can decode those moves into something useful, the better, Riva muttered under her breath, her fingers dancing over the screen like a concert pianist at a last recital. The problem is, this isn't just a dance. It's a damn puzzle. Every twist, every turn, it's all connected to the station's layout. If we misinterpret even one step, Nox sighed. We end up in waste disposal, and I've heard that's about as pleasant as a Z-Rill's backside on taco night. Riva chuckled, despite the tension. We're not there yet, but if we don't figure this out, the Z-Rill will squash any hope of resistance. And us too, while they are at it. That was the reality biting at their heels. The Z-Rill had no intention of losing their grip, and nothing sired their alien disposition quite like insubordination. They'd crack down harder than a boot on a bug, and the humans knew it. A sudden clang from the depths of the archives caught their attention, and Nox instinctively reached for the nearest piece of rebar. A pathetic weapon, but hey, beggars and choosers. The dim light outlined a new figure stepping out, a familiar face twisted with equal parts stress and mischief. It was Grint, their erstwhile ally and a master of not being where he was supposed to be. What are you two doing, sneaking around like your asses are on fire? We've got 100 sets of eyes on us. Trying not to get turned into goo, thanks, Riva replied without looking up. You here for a lecture on our incompetence or to help? Depends, Grint said with a lopsided grin. You got anything better than what the Z-Rill are serving? Heard their motivation soup is a bit thin. Har har, Nox said dryly. Actually, we might be onto something. If Riva can pull a rabbit out of this datapad, we might have a chance. Grint leaned in, his eyes darting nervously. You're talking about that dance routine, yeah, Riva replied, the glow from the screen casting shadows on her face. It's more than just some old Earth nostalgia. I think it's a map. Grint whistled low, an incredulous sound that spoke volumes. You're telling me those moves are gonna waltz us out of here? That's the plan, Nox said, trying to sound confident and failing spectacularly. Or we end up as the worst performing dance duo in galactic history. Riva straightened, a fire in her eyes that belied the fear beneath. We're close, I can feel it. We just need to get to the comms array without getting caught. Nox exchanged a glance with Grint. You heard the lady. We need a distraction. Can you manage that without blowing your cover? Grint nodded, his grin returning. I'll give it my best shot. Anything to stick it to these overgrown bugs. With a plan just slightly more concrete than vapor, they set out into the maze of the station. The tension was thick enough to choke on, the hum of machinery and Z-Rill voices a constant reminder of their imminent danger. Riva led the way, datapad clutched like a lifeline. Every now and then, she'd stop, performing a quick move that seemed nonsensical, but somehow fit the bizarre pattern they were following. Nox tried not to think too hard about the fact that his life depended on their ability to mimic a hologram's choreography. Grint split off, vanishing into the shadows like a ghost of mischief, promising a distraction that would draw the Z-Rill's gaze away from their path. Nox could almost hear the cogs turning in the station's bowels, the tension winding up like a clockwork bomb. As they rounded a corner, Riva suddenly stopped, holding up a hand. This is it, she whispered, pointing to a nondescript panel on the wall. The access point. Nox's heart thudded in his chest. You sure this is the right spot? Do you want to argue, or do you want to get out of here? Riva shot back, already prying at the panel with a tool she'd produced from somewhere. Nox took a breath. Good point. Let's not screw this up. The panel came free with a reluctant groan, revealing a series of tangled wires and alien tech that made Knox's head spin just looking at it. In theory, it was a simple task. Splice the right wires, override the controls, and send a signal that would disrupt the Z-Real's surveillance systems long enough for them to make their move. In practice, they were fiddling with something that could end in fireworks of the terminal kind. Riva worked quickly, fingers a blur as she connected cables and tapped commands into her datapad. The seconds stretched into minutes and Knox's nerves were frayed to the point of snapping. Every sound, every echo felt like the approach of doom. Finally, with a click that echoed like a gunshot in the silence, Riva leaned back, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Done. Now what? Knox asked, casting a wary glance down the corridor. Now, Riva said, getting to her feet, we move. If this works, we'll have a window of opportunity to reach the hangar. If not, we dance with death. Got it. Knox took one last look at the panel, the quiet reminder of the gamble they were taking. Let's get moving. They dashed through the corridors, adrenaline and fear their constant companions. The station was a labyrinth, a chaotic blend of human construction and alien modification, but Riva's datapad continued to guide them with unwavering precision. As they neared their goal, the telltale sounds of chaos reached their ears. Grint had apparently found a way to make good on his promise. The distant booms and shouts of Z-Real guards suggested that whatever he'd done, it had their full attention. They pushed onward, each step a gamble against fate. The hangar loomed ahead, a cavernous space echoing with the sounds of machinery and distant alarms. So far, so good, Knox muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Don't jinx it, Riva warned, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of a threat. They slipped into the hangar, ducking behind crates and machinery as they edged forward. The dance had brought them this far, but now it was time for the final act, one that would determine whether they soared to freedom or crashed to oblivion. Riva's datapad beeped softly, the signal a reminder of their fragile plan. There, she said, pointing to a small shuttle docked at the far end of the hangar. That's our ticket out. Knox looked at the vessel, doubt gnawing at the edges of his determination. You sure it's spaceworthy? Does it matter? Riva shot him a look that was equal parts exasperation and determination. We don't have any other options, he nodded, swallowing his fear. Let's go, then. Together, they made their way to the shuttle, every step feeling like a march through quicksand. Knox's heart hammered in his chest, anticipation mingling with dread. As they reached the vessel, Riva set to work on the controls, her fingers flying over the console with practiced ease. Knox stood guard, eyes scanning the hangar for any sign of pursuing Z-Real. The shuttle's systems hummed to life, a comforting vibration beneath his feet. We're in business, Riva said, her voice tinged with relief. Then let's get going before the locals decide to throw us a farewell party, Knox replied, climbing into the cockpit. With a final glance at the station, at the life they were leaving behind, the struggles and pain, they prepared for departure. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Knox couldn't help but smile grimly. Think they'll miss us? He asked, watching the station recede in the viewport. Riva chuckled, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. Doubt it. But they'll definitely remember us. As they shot into the void, leaving the Z-Real's domain and the drudgery of their existence behind, Knox couldn't resist a final thought, a hope buried deep beneath layers of cynicism and grit. Maybe, he mused, we can find a place where the only dancing we do is for fun. Riva's laughter filled the cockpit, a sound as bright as the stars. Until then, partner, we'll keep moving. And with that, they set a course for the unknown, for freedom, for a future unbound by chains. Knox was convinced that the universe had it out for him. If it wasn't the Z-Real breathing down their necks, it was the crushing weight of their own incompetence. And speaking of breathing, Vector, the Z-Real enforcer with all the charm of a rabid dog, seemed to have a sixth sense for sniffing out trouble. Trouble, right now, was spelled Knox and Riva. Vector made his rounds with the grace of a bulldozer, his multi-segmented eyes sweeping over the workers. He was looking for something, and Knox had a sinking feeling it wasn't a lost puppy. No, Vector's suspicion was like an itch that wouldn't go away, and it was getting harder to scratch. Riva was buried in the latest sequence from her datapad, muttering curses at the infernal device. If I ever get out of this, I'm going to find the idiot who programmed this thing and personally make them regret every life choice. That's the spirit, Knox said, keeping one eye on Vector's hulking form. But maybe save the vengeance fantasies for after we're not about to become wall decoration. Knox wished he could have shared Riva's single-minded focus, but his brain was on high alert watching the Z-Real Enforcer. Vector was just intelligent enough to be dangerous, which in Knox's book was the worst kind of intelligence. "Riva, buddy, I think we've got company," he whispered, nodding towards their unwanted overseer. Riva rolled her eyes but didn't look up. Let him look. It's not like he understands anything more than how not to trip over his own feet. "Yeah, well, those feet are getting closer," Knox pointed out. The enforcer was heading their way and Knox needed a distraction fast. "Got any bright ideas?" Riva finally glanced up, her gaze meeting Knox's. "One, but it involves you doing something incredibly stupid." Knox grinned, his adrenaline spiking. "My specialty." Vector loomed over them now, his mouth parts clicking in what was probably as close to speech as a Z-Real got. "Human, what is your business here?" The words came out like sandpaper on metal, a grating reminder of their inferiority. "Oh, you know," Knox said, feigning nonchalance. "Just trying to make sure the place doesn't fall apart. You wouldn't believe the things we find under the floor panels. I mean, yesterday I found a piece of toast." Toast? Vector's eyes narrowed, but it was hard to tell with Z-Real. For all Knox knew, that could be their happy face. "You are not authorized for repairs." "No, no," Knox replied, gesturing wildly. "Not repairs, more like preventative maintenance. Wouldn't want anything to go kaboom now, would we?" He shot Riva a look, hoping she'd take the hint. Riva, for her part, was quick on the uptake and slid her datapad behind a loose panel, pretending to swipe at dust. "Yeah, kabooms are bad, very bad, especially when you're standing too close." Knox continued to babble, hoping to distract Vector with a stream of nonsensical chatter. "And have you considered that maybe humans just have a natural knack for avoiding explosions? I mean, there's historical precedent. You ever hear of the great popcorn incident of 22? No. Well, let me tell you, it was." Riva coughed, cutting Knox off. "Hey, speaking of avoiding explosions, I think I've found the source of that weird buzzing noise." Vector's gaze shifted to her, the clicking of his mandibles indicating either interest or hunger. Knox hoped it was the former. "Buzzing noise?" Riva nodded, her expression the picture of earnestness. "Yeah, super weird, almost like an electrical short. Could cause a fire if left unchecked. Want us to take a look, or should we call in the professionals?" Vector looked between them, doubt written on his chitinous face. Finally, he gave a nod that was probably meant to be threatening but came off more like a bobblehead on a bumpy road. "Proceed, but report any findings." Riva saluted, a mocking glint in her eye. "Aye, aye, Captain Crunch." As Vector moved on, clearly dissatisfied but too lazy to investigate further, Riva and Knox shared a look of relief. "That was close," Knox murmured, wiping imaginary sweat from his brow. "Closer than a tick on a dog," Riva agreed, retrieving her datapad. "Now back to the dance." Knox groaned, eyeing the sequence with a feeling of impending doom. It wasn't just a matter of repeating the steps, it was about timing and precision and 1,000 other things they were currently fumbling through like two drunkards at a wedding. "Why did it have to be a dance?" Knox complained, trying to mimic one of the moves. "Why couldn't it have been a nice, simple puzzle, like a crossword or something? I'm good at crosswords." "Because, my dear Knox, that would be too easy." "And where's the fun in easy?" Riva replied, sarcasm dripping from her words. "Besides, I don't think the Z-Real are big fans of crosswords. Too many letters." They worked through the sequence again, Knox's arms flailing in what he hoped was some approximation of the intended movement. "Am I doing this right?" he asked, feeling like a fish out of water. "Well, you're doing something," Riva said, not exactly reassuring. "But we need to be more synchronized. If we mess this up, we'll be in waste disposal faster than you can say Z-Real Overlord." They practiced, again and again, the steps becoming slightly more coordinated but never quite right. The frustration was palpable, a cloud hanging over their efforts. "Why does it feel like we're just treading water?" Knox grumbled. "We're no closer to cracking this than we were an hour ago." "Because we're not just fighting the dance," Riva reminded him. "We're fighting ourselves. We need to trust in each other, and that's a tall order when our lives are on the line." Knox snorted. "Trust, huh? I trust you as far as I can throw you, which is to say, not at all." Riva laughed, a sound that broke through the tension like a lifeline. "Likewise, buddy. But sometimes you just have to take that leap." "Yeah, well, I've never been one for leaps. More of a slow crawl, if anything," Knox admitted, trying to focus on the task at hand. "Then crawl faster," Riva said, determination set in her jaw. "Because if we don't get this, we're toast. And I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to be breakfast." As they continued their awkward rehearsal, a plan began to take shape in Knox's mind. A crazy, reckless plan that just might work, assuming they could nail this damn dance. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the station, Grint was doing his best impression of a one-man circus. He'd set off a series of small, harmless explosions in the waste processing area, not enough to cause damage, but more than enough to send the Z-Reel into a tizzy. The chaos was a godsend, drawing attention away from Knox and Riva's antics and buying them precious time. It was a gamble, but then again, when was it not? Back at their makeshift dance floor, Knox and Riva finally managed to get through the sequence without tripping over their own feet or each other. It was a small victory, but in their world, small victories were worth celebrating. "Look at us," Knox said, panting slightly. "A regular Fred and Ginger. More like Fred and Frankenstein," Riva quipped, catching her breath. "But hey, progress is progress." With the dance mastered, or at least no longer a complete disaster, they turned their attention back to the task of reaching the hangar undetected. Grint's distraction had bought them time, but not an infinite supply. Riva checked her datapad, the map still glowing faintly in the dim light. "We're close. Just need to avoid another run-in with all Vector." Knox grinned, feeling the thrill of impending freedom. "No problem. He's probably busy trying to figure out which way is up." They moved cautiously through the station's corridors, the layout now as familiar as the back of their hands. The path to the hangar was clear, no sign of Z-Reel interference. As they reached the final stretch, Knox couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Against all odds, they'd managed to navigate the labyrinthine station, outwit the Z-Reel, and master a dance routine that should have been impossible. "Almost there," Riva said, her voice low and excited. "Once we're in the hangar, we're home free." Knox nodded, heart pounding with anticipation. "Let's not screw it up now." With one last check for any signs of Z-Reel presence, they entered the hangar, the shuttle waiting like a beacon of hope. The sense of relief was overwhelming, a weight lifting off their shoulders. As they approached the shuttle, Knox couldn't resist a final quip. "Hey, Riva, think we'll make it out in one piece?" "With any luck," Riva replied, her eyes locked on the vessel ahead. "And if not, at least we'll go out with a bang." Together, they climbed aboard, the future uncertain but full of possibility. For now, they'd beaten the odds, outwitted their captors, and seized a chance at freedom. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Knox felt a surge of exhilaration. They'd done the impossible, or at least the highly improbable, and lived to tell the tale. With one last glance back at the station, they launched into the void, leaving their past behind and embracing the unknown. After all, in Knox's experience, the unknown was just another word for adventure. And who could resist a little adventure? Vector's mandibles clicked in a rhythm that even Knox could tell was irritated, the alien equivalent of someone tapping their foot in impatience. The Enforcer's beady eyes scanned every corner of the station, paranoia cranked up to 11. It was like watching a security camera that had grown legs and a penchant for inflicting pain. I swear, Knox muttered, adjusting his grip on the fusion core he was pretending to transport, that Bugs got a stick shoved so far up his. Attention, Knox, Reva cut in sharply, her eyes glued to her datapad as they ducked into a shadowy alcove. We've got bigger problems than Vector's attitude. Like what? The fact that we're one bad dance move away from being space toast. Reva sighed, her fingers dancing over the screen with the precision of a surgeon. More like our little jig has some unexpected side effects. Knox looked over her shoulder, squinting at the data. What's that supposed to mean? It means, she said, frustration tinging her voice, that our dance isn't just a key to escaping this tin can. It's a bloody temporal wrench. Knox blinked, his brain struggling to catch up. A what now? A time-bending mess, Reva elaborated, tapping a line of data. Look at these readings. Every time we get the sequence right, we're causing micro-shifts, small temporal distortions, and they're starting to add up. Knox stared at the datapad, understanding dawning like a slow, reluctant sunrise. You mean we're not just stepping on toes, we're stepping on time itself? Exactly, genius, Reva replied, exasperated. Which means we're playing with fire and not the fun kind you roast marshmallows over. Great. Just what we needed. A dance routine that doubles as a time bomb. Reva shot him a look. We need to be careful. Vector's practically breathing down our necks, and these disturbances, they're gonna attract attention faster than a Z-reel to a human buffet. Knox grimaced at the thought. So what do? Stop practicing and hope the stars align in our favor. Not an option, Reva said firmly. If we don't get this right, we're not getting out. But we need to find a way to keep practicing without turning this station into a temporal funhouse. Fantastic. Dancing, time travel, and now stealth. I didn't sign up for this, you know. Neither did I, Reva shot back, already moving through the cramped corridors. But here we are, so let's make it work. Practicing was now akin to being in a circus act, with Knox and Reva tiptoeing around both the station's layout and the fragile strands of time. They found a quiet corner in the archives, where the smell of burnt toast mixed with desperation, a fitting backdrop for their clandestine rehearsals. Ready? Reva asked, hiding her apprehension behind a mask of determination. As ready as I'll ever be to potentially rip the universe a new one, Knox replied, his voice light but his face serious. They began again, their movements more careful, more synchronized. It was a dance on the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from disaster. With every correct sequence, the air seemed to shimmer, reality itself quivering like a mirage. Feel that? Reva whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. Yeah, Knox replied, adjusting his stance. It's like the station's holding its breath. Exactly. And if we screw this up, it's gonna exhale in all the wrong ways. They continued, the dance becoming less of a stumbling shuffle and more of an intricate waltz. The air around them rippled faintly, the only sign that they were bending the rules of time as easily as they bent their knees. But with every small victory came greater scrutiny. Vector, ever the nosy insectoid overlord, had increased his surveillance to near paranoid levels. His presence was a constant shadow, his mandibles clicking a ceaseless symphony of suspicion. Why do I feel like we're being watched by 1,000 insect eyes? Knox grumbled during a rare moment of rest, wiping sweat from his brow. Probably because we are, Reva replied, her eyes scanning the room. The more we practice, the closer we get to breaking out, but we're also getting closer to getting caught. Knox sighed, leaning back against the cold, metallic wall. So, how do we keep this up without turning Vector into our personal executioner? Reva considered the question, her mind ticking over possibilities like a well-oiled machine. We need a distraction, a big one. Something that'll make our little time hiccup seem like a breeze. A distraction, huh? Knox mused, a grin slowly spreading across his face. I think I might know just the clown for the job. Grint, Reva guessed, and Knox nodded. Yeah, he's got a talent for chaos. If anyone can keep Vector busy, it's him. Communicating with Grint was easier said than done, given the Z-Reel's proclivity for monitoring every channel. But Nox and Riva had long since mastered the art of subtlety, using codes and signals as naturally as breathing. "Think he'll do it?" Riva asked, once they'd sent the message. "If there's one thing Grint loves, it's making a mess," Nox replied. "Besides, he owes me one." The next day, as they resumed their practice, the station's atmosphere shifted. A series of small but strategically placed sabotages sent the Z-Reel scuttling in every direction, mandibles clicking in frantic irritation. "Looks like Grint's on the job," Riva said, smirking as a distant explosion shook the floor. "Never doubted him," Nox replied, his grin matching hers. Under cover of chaos, they practiced with renewed vigor, each movement more confident, more precise. The air hummed with the potential of their success, the smell of burnt toast almost comforting in its constancy. "Nearly there," Riva said, her voice a tense whisper as they paused for breath. "And not a moment too soon," Nox replied, glancing nervously at the flickering lights. "I think I'm starting to hallucinate Z-Reel in the shadows." As they resumed, their movements were a dance of precision, threading the needle of time and space. Each step felt like a heartbeat, each twist a note in a symphony only they could hear. But even in the midst of their focused routine, the threat of discovery loomed large. The temporal shifts were small, but their accumulation was becoming noticeable, the fabric of time groaning under the strain. "Keep it together," Riva encouraged, sensing Nox's growing agitation. "We're close." "I know," he replied, gritting his teeth. "I just wish we weren't playing with the universe's most temperamental yo-yo." With a final spin, they completed the sequence, the world around them settling with a soft sigh. For a moment, they stood frozen, waiting for the fallout. "Did it work?" Nox asked, his voice barely more than a breath. Riva checked her datapad, relief washing over her features. "I think so." "The distortions are stabilizing." A nervous laugh escaped Nox's lips. "Well, that's a relief. I was half expecting to wake up in the Jurassic period." "Let's not get too comfortable," Riva warned, although a smile tugged at her lips. "We're not out yet." No sooner had the words left her mouth than the station's alarms blared, a cacophony of sound that sent shivers down their spines. Vector's silhouette appeared in the doorway, mandibles clicking with malicious intent. "Humans," he rasped, his tone like nails on a chalkboard. "What have you done?" "Us," Nox replied, feigning innocence. "We're just having a little dance party. Didn't think you were into that." Vector advanced, his presence a looming threat. "Your movements have been noted." "Unacceptable disturbances." Riva stepped forward, her expression defiant. "Funny, we thought it was just our irresistible charm." The enforcer's gaze narrowed, suspicion clear. "You will be detained for questioning." Nox shot Riva a desperate look, their escape hanging in the balance. But even as Vector moved to grab them, the station shuddered violently, Grint's handiwork coming in clutch at the perfect moment. Amidst the chaos, Nox and Riva seized the opportunity, slipping past the distraught enforcer and darting into the corridors. Adrenaline coursed through their veins, the thrill of the chase mingling with the fear of capture. "We can't keep this up forever," Nox panted as they ran. "Just need to hold out a little longer," Riva replied, determination etched in every line of her face. "Grint's got a plan. We just have to trust him." "Trust." "Right," Nox said, chuckling despite himself. "Easier said than done, but here's hoping." They weaved through the station, avoiding patrols and navigating the labyrinthine structure with the skill of a pair who'd spent their lives in captivity. Each turn was a gamble, each heartbeat a drumbeat of impending doom, but they weren't alone in their fight. The station itself seemed to conspire in their favor, Grint's expertly timed distractions leading the Z-Reel on a wild goose chase. As they neared the hangar, their path clear, Nox couldn't help the wave of hope that surged through him. They were so close, the door to freedom almost within reach. "Almost there," Riva said, her voice breathless with anticipation. "Just a little further," Nox agreed, catching sight of the hangar doors looming ahead. With one final burst of speed, they reached the hangar, the shuttle standing ready like a loyal companion. Behind them, the station was a cacophony of alarms and confusion, the perfect cover for their escape. Inside the shuttle, Knox felt a sense of triumph swell in his chest. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd outmaneuvered their captors, mastered the dance of time, and seized their chance at freedom. Riva secured the shuttle's controls, her fingers moving with the confidence of someone who was born to fly. "Let's get out of here." As the engines roared to life, Knox couldn't resist a final, irreverent grin. "Think we'll make it?" Riva met his gaze, her smile matching his. "With any luck. And if not, at least we'll have one hell of a story." Together, they launched into the void, leaving the chaos of the station behind. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with danger and unknowns. But for the first time, they were in control. As the stars stretched out before them, a vast expanse of potential and possibility, Knox and Riva knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The moment they launched into the void, Knox thought they might actually pull it off. The thrill of escape wrapped around him like a warm blanket, but just as he was ready to bask in their fleeting victory, reality crashed down harder than a starship on a bad day. It all went to hell quicker than you could say Z-Real Overlord. Alarms blared, the kind that made your heart do somersaults, and the hangar doors slammed shut with a sound that said, "Not today, humans." "Looks like someone hit the snooze button on our getaway," Knox muttered, his grin faltering as the shuttle jerked to a halt. Riva's hands flew over the controls, but the ship refused to budge. "We're locked down." "Grint must have tripped something he shouldn't have." "Classic Grint," Knox said, rolling his eyes. "Can't even trust him to throw a good distraction without throwing us under the bus, too." The distant sound of Vector's mandibles tapping echoed through the comms like a death knell. "Escape attempt noted. Prepare for capture." "Ah, music to my ears," Riva groaned, slamming her hand on the dashboard. "I knew this was too easy." They were hauled back onto the station, Vector and his goons waiting with all the welcoming charm of a black hole. The enforcer's mandibles clicked with a rhythm that suggested he was 2 steps away from eating them alive, and not metaphorically. "Humans," Vector rasped, his tone suggesting he'd rather be talking to a bucket of bolts. "Your antics have been amusing, but now it's time to pay the price." Knox shrugged, trying to ignore the knot tightening in his stomach. "Price? We're fresh out-ta credits, but I can offer some stellar dance lessons." Vector's mandibles snapped shut with a sound like a mousetrap. "You are charged with disrupting station operations and unauthorized temporal manipulation. Punishments will be severe. Could you at least tell us what's behind door number 2? Knox quipped, but it was hard to keep up the banter when the floor felt like it was giving way beneath him. The sense of failure settled on them like a lead blanket. They were escorted through the station, past sneering Z-Real and indifferent humans, every step a reminder of just how far they'd fallen. The archives greeted them, drearier than ever, the smell of burnt toast replaced by the stench of their defeat. Knox and Riva were tossed into a cell with all the grace of a garbage scow unloading its cargo. The door slammed shut, trapping them in a small, dimly lit room that reeked of despair and stale air. "Well, Riva," Knox said, flopping onto a bench with exaggerated nonchalance. "We've really outdone ourselves this time." "Yeah, if there was an award for most incompetent escape attempt, we'd be top contenders," Riva replied, leaning against the wall, her voice heavy with frustration. "Hey, every failure is just a practice run for success, right?" Knox tried, though the words tasted like ash. Riva rubbed her temples, the glow of her datapad casting a pale light across her face. "We're missing something, something important." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, like an actual plan." "No," Riva said, shaking her head. "It's not just about the dance, we were doing it all wrong." "What, you mean my moonwalk wasn't saving the universe?" "Funny," Riva said, but there was no humor in her eyes. "We were so focused on the precision on the steps. We forgot what was really driving us." "Which is?" Knox asked, genuinely curious despite the sarcasm he tried to inject. "Hope," Riva said quietly, "and unity. We were moving in sync, but we weren't really together." Knox snorted. "You've been reading too many self-help books." I'm serious, Riva insisted. The dance is more than just a sequence, it's a symbol. The Z-Real see us as weak because we don't act like them, but that's our strength. And here I thought our strength was being able to fit into cramped spaces, Knox said, though his tone softened. Unity, huh? Riva nodded, the shadows in her eyes slowly lifting. Yeah, we need to move as one, not just physically but spiritually. We've got to believe in what we're doing. And what are we doing exactly? Knox asked, a cynical smile playing on his lips. Proving the Z-Real wrong, Riva said, a fire igniting in her gaze. Showing them we're not just chimps they can push around. Okay, Knox relented, holding up his hands. I admit it, you're right. We've been going about this all wrong, but what now? We're stuck in this cage and Vector's probably sharpening his claws for us. We use what we have, Riva said, motioning to the datapad she clutched like a lifeline. Map out the dance again, but this time we focus on our connection. We make it about us. Knox scratched his chin. So we forget the steps and just be our charming selves. Exactly, Riva said, a grin finally breaking through. Our charm is our secret weapon. Well, if it's charm we need, we're definitely doomed, Knox replied with a chuckle. But let's give it a shot. Can't get any worse, right? As they sat together, plotting out their new approach, Knox felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. Maybe it was the futility of it all, maybe it was madness setting in. But for the first time in ages, he felt like they were on the right track. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Hard to tell in a place where time seemed to have taken a permanent vacation. And they worked tirelessly, their movements a strange ballet of hope and determination. Knox watched as Riva's confidence grew with each practice run, her movements no longer just mechanical but infused with purpose. They weren't just two people trying to escape. They were a force, a statement against the Z-Real's tyranny. And as they danced in that dreary cell, the walls seemed to close in, then expand, as if recognizing their resolve. Knox realized it wasn't just the dance that held power. It was the unity behind it, the sheer human audacity to defy fate with nothing but a bit of rhythm and grit. Think this'll work? Riva asked, her breath coming in steady gasps, more from excitement than exhaustion. Knox leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. If it doesn't, at least we'll give them a show they won't forget. Yeah, Riva agreed, her eyes alight with a sense of purpose. Let's make it a good one. As they sat side by side, the weight of their defeat slowly lifted, replaced by a determination they hadn't felt before. They might have been prisoners, but they were far from beaten. Their final dance was yet to come, and they'd face it together, with hope, unity, and maybe just a touch of madness. Because if they'd learned anything, it was that sometimes the universe didn't need to be bent. It just needed a little shove in the right direction. In the belly of the beast, with the odds stacked against them, Knox and Riva were ready to do just that, proving once and for all that humans were more than the sum of their parts. They were survivors, and they were just getting started. Knox leaned back against the cell wall, tapping his foot in a rhythm that was half boredom, half desperation. You know, Riva, I always thought I'd die doing something extraordinary. Turns out, suffocating in a cell for trying to dance might be it. Riva looked up from her datapad, eyes sharp despite the dull light. You keep saying death like it's a punchline, Knox. Ever think about what comes after? Only every other Tuesday, and today's Thursday, Knox replied. But if there's an afterlife, I hope they serve better coffee than the swill we get here. Always the optimist, Riva said, shaking her head with a half-smile. But we need more than jokes. We need people. People, Knox echoed, raising an eyebrow. You mean like an audience? I didn't know we were going for a standing ovation. I'm serious, Knox. We can't do this alone. We need everyone in sync to make this work. It's time for a revolution, not just a two-person dance-off. A rebellion of the rhythmically challenged, Knox quipped, but his mind was already racing with possibilities. All right, so how do we recruit without getting caught? We start with Grint, Riva said, voice steady. He owes us for screwing up. Plus, his mouth's so big he could shout across sectors if he wanted. Fantastic. I love relying on someone who treats sabotage like a hobby, Knox sighed, but he knew she was right. Let's get the band back together. With their minds made up, they began whispering to their cell neighbors, word by word, idea by idea, spreading like a quiet wildfire. It was a spark of hope, a whisper of rebellion. And soon enough, Grint shuffled over, a small, apologetic grin on his face. "Hey, Knox, Riva, heard you're looking to cause some trouble again," Grint said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Funny you should mention that," Knox replied, leaning forward. "We need your help, and by help I mean not breaking things this time." "Yeah, about that, sorry," Grint mumbled. "I thought I was helping, got the wires crossed, you know." "Grint, you'd get lost in a one-way street," Riva said, but the edge in her voice softened. "We need to teach everyone the dance." "Think you can spread the word without tripping an alarm?" Grint's eyes lit up with a mix of mischief and determination. "You bet. I'll get the word out faster than you can say Z-Real Overlord. Let's hope you're better at spreading the word than you are at, well, everything else," Knox said, giving him a mock salute. Over the next few days, the cell block became a clandestine dance studio. Humans moved with hesitant steps, guided by Knox and Riva's whispered instructions. It was a strange spectacle, and more than once Knox had to stifle a laugh as he watched otherwise stoic prisoners wobble through moves like drunken penguins. "You call that a spin, Marcus?" Knox teased one of the burly prisoners. "I've seen asteroids move with more grace." "Hey, you try doing this when your feet are the size of boulders," Marcus grumbled, but there was a hint of a smile beneath his gruff exterior. Slowly but surely, the prisoners moved from awkward fumbling to something resembling coordination. Each step, each beat, was a testament to their shared determination. The dance wasn't just steps anymore. It was their unifying call, a single collective heartbeat amidst the cold, sterile walls. Riva watched with pride, her voice clear as she guided them through the sequences. "Remember, it's not just about the moves, it's the message. We're more than they think we are. We're also more than we think we are," Knox added, letting a smirk slip through. "And by that, I mean we're bloody brilliant." As days turned into a blurred tapestry of practice sessions, sweat, and hushed laughter, the unity among them grew stronger. The Z-Real guards remained blissfully unaware, too focused on their systems and routines to notice the quiet rebellion taking shape under their noses. Finally, the day came to put their clandestine efforts to the test. The signal was subtle, a tap-tap on the metal bars, a shared glance, a nod. Their small army of dancers was ready for the main event. "Here goes nothing," Knox said, standing beside Riva as they prepared for the moment of truth. "Or everything," Riva replied, her voice a steady anchor. The prisoners began to move, the rhythm slow at first, then gaining momentum. It was a dance that defied their captors, a synchronized revolt against their perceived inferiority. Knox could feel it in his bones, the pulse of defiance echoed by every step, every pivot. Across the stations, human chatter quieted as the steps reverberated through the halls, creating ripples in the temporal fabric, a blip in the Z-Real's arrogant calculations. Vector's voice crackled through the comms, caught off guard by the sudden disturbance. "Unidentified activity detected. All units report. Repeat, all units report." Knox chuckled as he caught Riva's eye. "Guess we've finally got their attention." The Z-Real guards scrambled, their confusion evident as they tried to pin down the source of the temporal blips. But the humans moved as one, their unity shielding the individual. It wasn't perfect, a chaotic grace, like a ballet performed on a crumbling stage, but it was enough. The dance created a brief, beautiful disruption, a momentary loop in time that left the Z-Real stumbling over their own protocols. Knox could almost taste the confusion in the air, a sweet, intoxicating nectar of their captors' bewilderment. The prisoners' movements faltered as the loop closed, but the glimmer of hope in their eyes was undeniable. They might not have escaped physically, but they'd shown their strength, their potential to stand as equals against their overlords. "Did we do it?" Marcus asked, panting as the dance came to an end. "We did something," Riva replied, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. And sometimes something is everything. Vector's mandibles clicked with frustration through the comms, his composure slipping. Humans, cease your activities at once. This disturbance will be punished severely. Knox leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Punish us for what? Dancing. I'd like to see that in the rulebook, Vector. The enforcer's silence was deliciously satisfying, a small victory in the face of overwhelming odds. The prisoners exchanged quick, conspiratorial smiles, their spirits lifted by their shared success. Guess we're not just slightly evolved chimps anymore, Grint joked, his usual bumbling overshadowed by newfound confidence. Never were, Knox said, clapping him on the back. We're human, and that's enough. In the aftermath of their covert uprising, the prisoners settled back into their routine, but the air was different now, charged with possibility, ripe with defiance. They knew the road ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time they believed they had a fighting chance. As they sat in their cell, a comfortable silence between them, Riva nudged Knox with her elbow. Think we can pull it off for real next time? Knox looked around at his fellow prisoners, at the determination etched into their faces. If we can make those Zeril lose their cool with a little footwork, I'd say anything's possible. Then let's make it possible, Riva said, her voice steady, unyielding. They had planted the seeds of rebellion, watered them with sweat, and watched them grow under the fluorescent lights of their prison. The Zeril might have underestimated them, but they'd learned soon enough that humans were far more than meets the eye. Knox and Riva were ready to continue leading their impromptu army, to turn the station into a stage for their final, triumphant performance. Because if life was a dance, they'd decided to lead and they weren't about to give up the floor. To the future, then, Knox said, raising an imaginary glass to the air. May it be as unpredictable as our dance moves. Riva clinked her invisible glass against his. To unity, she added. And to proving those alien bastards wrong. The stars outside the station gleamed brightly, indifferent to their struggles. But somewhere in the vast expanse of the cosmos, Knox liked to think there was a place where humans danced free, a place they'd one day call home. And as they drifted into sleep, lulled by the quiet hum of the station, they dreamt not of escape, but of a future where their steps would echo through the universe, a reminder that humanity was here to stay, unbroken, unbowed, and as irrepressible as ever. The cell block was humming with an undercurrent of barely contained chaos. Knox looked around, taking in the nervous energy, the slight tremors of anticipation that seemed to buzz in time with the flickering fluorescence. It was like being backstage before a show, if the show was a doomed rebellion and the backstage a grimy prison cell. "All right, folks," Knox called out, clapping his hands to gather attention. "Let's see if we can turn this dance into a jailbreak and not just an embarrassing footnote in the prison newsletter." Riva rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. "If we pull this off, we'll be legends. If we don't, well, at least we'll go down with style. Or at least in sync," Knox added, flashing a grin. "Cue the music in our heads, and let's give these Zeril something to twitch their mandibles about." Grint, bless his heart, was busy ensuring the message had reached every corner of their ragtag community. His enthusiasm was infectious, if somewhat misplaced, like a puppy who'd found itself in a room full of squeaky toys but wasn't quite sure which one to chew on first. "Hey, Grint," Knox called, watching the man flit between groups like some kind of over-caffeinated pigeon. "Try not to explode anything before we even get started, yeah." "Got it, Knox," Grint replied, giving a thumbs up that was as encouraging as it was worrisome. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Execute the dance, create enough temporal disturbance for the Zeril systems to glitch, and use the ensuing confusion to make their escape. Simple, yes. Easy, not a chance. "Remember," Riva said, her voice slicing through the nervous chatter, "it's all about the timing. Hit the beats, create the shift, and we've got ourselves a one-way ticket out of here. Or a fast track to waste disposal. Marcus grumbled, though his attempts at humor did little to mask the anxiety etched on his face. Knox patted him on the back. "Think positive, Marcus. If we end up in waste disposal, at least we won't die of boredom." With the final nod from Riva, the first sequence began. It started slow, a cautious warming up of limbs and spirits, each move a calculated step against their oppressors. The Z-Real monitors remained blissfully unaware, their systems focused on more pressing matters than a bunch of humans deciding to hold an impromptu dance recital. "Vector's gonna love this," Knox muttered under his breath, feeling the rhythm start to take over, the pulse of defiance coursing through them all. The tempo increased, prisoners moving as one, a strange orchestra of defiance in motion. The floor vibrated beneath their feet, the air thrumming with the promise of rupture, of a rebellion that was equal parts ridiculous and daring. "Keep it together, people," Riva shouted as the first temporal ripples made themselves known, small shifts in time that danced alongside them, a reflection of their determination. "Is it working?" Grint asked, eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. Knox glanced at him, smirking. "It better be, or we're just a bunch of idiots doing jazzercise for no reason." The ripples grew, the temporal fabric stretching, bending, almost compliant to their defiance. The Z-Real's systems blared warnings, alarms shrieking to life like a symphony of panic. "Unidentified temporal fluctuations detected," the system's voice echoed, as dry and disinterested as a librarian announcing closing time. "Analyzing, analyzing. Vector's gonna have an aneurysm," Knox said, grinning at Riva as they continued to weave through the steps that were more rebellion than dance. The Z-Real guards, however, were not quite as amused. Their confusion was palpable, mandibles clicking in disarray as they struggled to comprehend the chaos unfurling around them. The humans pressed on, the dance becoming a crescendo of chaos, each step a defiant middle finger to their captors. "Warning, temporal instability at critical levels," the system droned. "Immediate intervention required." "Yeah, good luck with that," Riva muttered, her voice barely audible over the escalating cacophony. The Z-Real scrambled, their sleek, efficient movements now reduced to a comical display of disoriented flailing. Knox almost felt sorry for them, almost. But then he remembered the years of oppression, the dismissals, being underestimated like a flea at an elephant parade, and found he didn't feel all that sorry after all. The dance reached its peak, the room a blur of motion and noise, and Knox felt it. A shift, a twist of the universe that seemed to nod in agreement with their rebellion. The world around them wavered, the distant stars visible through the station's viewport skewing slightly, as if to say, "We'll allow it just this once." "Come on," Riva urged, motioning for the final sequence. "Let's finish this." And finish it they did. The last steps were more instinct than practice, a culmination of their hopes, fears, and stubborn refusal to be anything less than free. As the final beat echoed through the station, the temporal distortion peaked, creating a wave of disruption that knocked the Z-Real systems into a stunned silence. The guards, caught in the temporal backlash, staggered, their confusion turning to panic as they realized control had slipped through their mandibles. "Systems rebooting," the computer finally announced, its voice tinged with the robotic equivalent of mild irritation. "Recalibrating temporal stabilizers." The humans didn't wait for the systems to catch up. As the Z-Real stumbled over themselves, Knox, Riva, and the rest of the prisoners took their chance, slipping through the cracks in the station's defenses, a human tide sweeping through corridors, fueled by adrenaline and sheer bloody-mindedness. "To the shuttle bay," Knox shouted, leading the charge. "Let's see if we can borrow ourselves a ride out of here." Grint, in an uncharacteristic moment of competence, had managed to bypass the first set of security doors, the path to potential freedom now open before them. "Managed not to blow it up," he said, a touch of pride in his voice. "You know, yet." "I'm impressed, Grint," Knox laughed, clapping him on the back. "Now if you can manage to keep that up, we might just make it." The path to the shuttle bay was a blur of activity, prisoners ducking and weaving through corridors as alarms blared overhead. Vector's voice cut through the chaos, each word laced with venom. "Humans, cease your activities immediately. Return to your cells or face termination." "Yeah, because that's gonna work," Riva scoffed, her breath coming in heavy bursts as they neared the bay. The shuttle loomed before them, a metal beast that promised either salvation or swift retribution, depending on how things played out. Knox paused for a moment, taking in the sight of it, freedom wrapped in steel and uncertainty. "Let's not screw this up," he said, glancing at Riva with a grin. "I'm not really in the mood for being disintegrated today. Or any day, for that matter," Riva replied, a fierce determination in her eyes. As they boarded the shuttle, the sound of pursuing Zeril guards grew louder, their rage palpable as they struggled to regain control. Knox cast one last look back at the station, at the place that had been both prison and stage. It was time to go. Grint, surprisingly competent under pressure, fumbled with the shuttle's controls, his fingers flying over the interface with a kind of clumsy grace. "I think I got it," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Knox slid into the seat beside him, adding his own hands to the controls. "Let's light this candle before our luck runs out." The shuttle roared to life, engines thrumming with barely contained power as the bay doors opened, the vastness of space beckoning beyond. The Zeril were closing in, their shouts drowned out by the rising crescendo of the shuttle's systems. "Punch it, Grint," Riva shouted, bracing herself against the acceleration. Grint complied, and with a lurch that rattled teeth and bones, the shuttle shot forward, out into the void. The stars stretched around them, the station receding into the distance as they broke free of the Zeril's grasp. Knox let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, a laugh bubbling up from the depths as the weight of what they'd done settled in. "We did it," he said, disbelief and triumph mingling in his voice. "We actually did it," Riva laughed, a sound of pure relief and exhilaration. "And without blowing anything up, no less." "Well, not yet anyway." Grint grinned, his expression a mix of pride and lingering disbelief. "Guess I'm not completely useless after all." "Never said you were," Knox replied, clapping him on the back. "Just mostly." The shuttle sped onward, leaving the chaos behind, a testament to their stubbornness and refusal to be anything but free. They danced their defiance, twisted time itself, and in doing so had carved out a space for themselves among the stars. They might have been underestimated, dismissed, and ridiculed, but they'd proven themselves more than capable of defying the odds. The Zeril had underestimated them, and in doing so, had handed them the keys to their own freedom. As the adrenaline ebbed and the reality of their escape settled in, Knox found himself grinning at the thought of what lay ahead. The universe was vast and indifferent, but for the first time, it felt like it might just hold a place for them, a place where humans could dance free, unburdened by the chains of oppression. "To the future," Knox said, raising an imaginary glass once more. "To dancing and to whatever comes next." Riva clinked her invisible glass against his, her smile bright as the stars beyond. "To proving the universe wrong," she agreed. And so they sailed on, their path uncertain but their spirits unbroken, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because if there was one thing they'd learned, it was that humans were far more stubborn, resourceful, and downright unpredictable than anyone could have guessed. And that, Knox thought with a grin, was something worth dancing about. The shuttle hurtled through space, the stars blurring past as if they were in some cosmic washing machine on spin cycle. Knox leaned back in his seat, staring out at the inky void. It felt good, liberating even to be out of the Zeril's clutches. For once, he wasn't just a cog in their intergalactic machine. He was a free man. Well, as free as one could be when the galaxy was still mostly run by Google 24/0 and bureaucratic nightmares. "Can't believe we actually pulled it off," Marcus muttered from his seat, eyes wide like saucers. "I was sure we'd be vaporized by now." "Yeah, well," Knox replied, the corner of his mouth tugging into a smirk, I think I'd rather take my chances with the vacuum of space than listen to Vector's motivational speeches for one more minute. Right. He talks like he swallowed a thesaurus and then vomited it back up, Riva added, fiddling with a datapad she found tucked in the shuttle's console. Grint, still riding high on the adrenaline of their escape, was sprawled in his seat, a dazed expression on his face. "It's like we're actually free," he said, voice full of awe. "No more lugging fusion cores or pretending to care about Z-Real's quarterly reports." "You're telling me," Knox said, shaking his head. "I never want to see another fusion core again." I was starting to feel like a glorified pack mule with a slight caffeine addiction. As the shuttle settled into the rhythm of space travel, a calm descended over them. The chaos of the station, the dance, the escape, it all seemed like a distant fever dream. But they were here, alive and kicking, which was more than they could have hoped for a few hours ago. "So, what now?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. "We just float around until we run out of air and snacks," Knox shrugged. "Not quite the glorious end I had in mind, but it's an option." Riva, still tapping away at her datapad, perked up. "Actually, I've been poking around the Z-Real's systems we snagged. Turns out they've been monitoring a lot more than just us. There's resistance movements popping up all over. Seems our little jig might have started a trend." "Great," Grint said, rolling his eyes. "From prisoners to trendsetters. Next thing you know, we'll be doing endorsement deals." "At least we won't have to worry about being underestimated anymore," Knox said. "Surprise, the chimps learned to dance." Riva chuckled, shaking her head. "The Z-Real must be pissed. All that tech, and they couldn't predict a bunch of humans would boogie their way to freedom." "Serves them right," Knox replied. "They should have known better than to underestimate humanity's knack for chaos and defiance." Their conversation ebbed and flowed as they settled into the monotony of space travel. Grint, in his usual fashion, managed to keep the mood light with a steady stream of jokes, most of which involved creative uses for fusion cores and the universally despised taste of Z-Real nutrition bars. Meanwhile, Riva continued to sift through the information on her datapad. Her expression shifted from amusement to intrigue, and Knox could almost see the gears turning in her head. "Find something interesting?" he asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. "Maybe," Riva replied, her eyes glued to the screen. "The Z-Real aren't just worried about us. They're losing control. Resistance cells are popping up everywhere, fueled by our little escapade." "Guess we did more than just dance our way out of prison," Marcus said, sounding impressed despite himself. "Looks like we've got ourselves a revolution," Knox added, a hint of pride in his voice. "About time the galaxy realized humans aren't just here to warm seats and follow orders." The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. They'd set something in motion, something much bigger than themselves. And while the outcome was uncertain, one thing was clear: the Z-Real's reign of smug superiority was crumbling. As the shuttle continued its journey, the vastness of space stretching out before them, Knox couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd sparked a change, a chance for humanity to carve out its own place among the stars. "So, what do we do now?" Grint asked, always the practical one. "Can't exactly go back to the Z-Real with a sorry, my bad, and a handshake." "No," Knox agreed, leaning forward, determination etched on his face. "We find these other resistance groups. We show them what we've got. We keep pushing until the Z-Real get the point and bugger off." "That's a big task," Marcus said, a note of doubt in his voice. "Yeah, well," Knox said with a shrug, "I never liked taking the easy route." As the shuttle hurtled through the stars, away from the prison that once held them, Knox knew their journey was far from over. There were battles to be fought, allies to be found, and a galaxy to be shaken from its complacency. But for the first time, he felt like it might just be possible. After all, if they could dance their way out of a high-security prison, who knew what else they were capable of? The vast expanse of space loomed before them, full of possibilities, challenges, and the promise of freedom. And as Knox settled back in his seat, he couldn't help but smile at the thought of what lay ahead. "To freedom," he said, raising an imaginary glass once more. To proving the universe wrong, Riva added, her voice full of conviction. And with that they sailed on, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw their way. Because if there was one thing they'd learned, it was that humans were far more resilient, resourceful, and downright defiant than anyone had ever given them credit for. And that, Knox thought with a grin, was a legacy worth leaving behind. As the stars continued to blur past, the group settled into a comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. The weight of their actions hung heavy, but so did the thrill of uncertainty and the promise of change. Grint, ever the restless one, finally broke the silence. "So, how do we reach these other resistance groups? It's not like they've got a Facebook page, right?" Riva snorted. "Pretty sure the Z-Real banned that after the cat meme uprising of 32. Marcus, finally finding his voice, suggested, "What about the archives? Weren't they supposed to be a treasure trove of information before the Z-Real took over?" Knox nodded thoughtfully. "Worth a shot. We could find a lead there. At the very least, it beats floating around aimlessly and waiting for the air to get stale." Grint's face lit up, eager to contribute. "I could try to hack into some old comms system, see if there's any chatter we can intercept." "You sure?" Knox teased, shooting him a sideways glance. "Last time you tried that, you almost blew up half the station." Grint grinned, unabashed. "Yeah, but I didn't write. So technically, that's a win." Riva rolled her eyes, but there was an unmistakable warmth in her voice. "Well, if anyone can find a signal in all this noise, it's you, Grint." With a plan starting to form, the shuttle hummed with renewed purpose. They might not have all the answers, but they were on their way to finding them. The galaxy was vast, but so too was their resolve. "Think we'll ever get a breather?" Marcus mused, a hint of weariness in his voice. Knox chuckled, shaking his head. "Breathers are overrated. Besides, what's life without a little chaos to spice things up?" Marcus sighed, but there was a small smile playing on his lips. "Guess I better get used to it then." The shuttle continued its journey through the stars, a lone vessel in an unforgiving universe. But within its metal shell, hope burned bright, fueled by defiance, camaraderie, and an unyielding spirit. As they sped towards the future, each of them knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But together, they were more than the sum of their parts. Together, they were unstoppable. And so, with the echoes of their dance still reverberating in their hearts, they pressed on, ready to challenge the status quo, to ignite change, and to prove that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humanity's light would never be extinguished.